big news about Speaker Nancy Pelosi stepping down from her leadership position, also Steny Hoyer as well, both of them saying it's time for a new generation of leaders to step up. Hoyer will be our guest this morning. Elizabeth, if we could just take a moment to just mark the end of this era, and by the way, ending again with a lot of disgraceful behavior by Republicans in Congress, and even during her announcement, not showing up, not clapping, acting like they were raised in a barn. I mean, seriously, they don't know how to be polite. This is not what I'm used to in Washington. I've seen vicious fights happening between right and left here in Washington, but when you're picking up each other's kids at schools, you're parents, you're Americans, you're patriots, you're respectful of each other. They were disrespectful even during this announcement. So your thoughts on that, but also her legacy as the first woman Speaker of the House.
Well, first of all, it's an extraordinary legacy.
It's remarkable.
For 20 years, most powerful woman in Washington for much of that time. She was always, I have to say, underestimated.
Always.
Always by everybody. That she was too old to speak. Remember the groundswell against her last time. She was too old. She was never going to get these votes through. But look at what she did. We've talked about the Affordable Care Act. She pushed through all the Biden legislation with a very small margin. She was tough. We ran a great series of photos of her in the Times this morning and last night, and you forget, there's the great photo of Nancy Pelosi shaking her finger at Donald Trump, in the cabinet room. There's the great photo of her in the Oval Office, arguing with Trump, coming out with that famous coat and her sunglasses. So she in this town where women still do not hold as much power as they should. She was an outlier, and she was an example to a lot of women.
She really broke through, groundbreaking for women. It's why she was on the first Forbes 50 over 50 lists at the sort of top of the ranking, because her career is truly incredible, and her impact at all stages of her life is incredible. And Steve Rattner, I know you want to talk the economy. You have charts on the housing crisis, but chime in on Nancy Pelosi, given your knowledge and experience with her.
Sure. I obviously saw her as one of her donors, one of her supporters. I have to say I was initially a little bit skeptical. I had read somewhere that her district in San Francisco was the 5th most liberal district in the country, so I didn't quite know what she'd be all about. But she turned out to be, as you've heard from others, an incredibly pragmatic, get things done speaker. And as I said, I saw her, got to know her as one of her supporters, and her energy and all that was incredible. The last time I had dinner with her, which was maybe a month or so ago, she had come to New York. She had started with meetings at 8 o'clock in the morning, dinner at 7, completely attentive, on her game, not in a hurry. The famous line about her was she was a little bit like Ginger Rogers. She did everything that Fred Astaire did, except backwards and in heels, and with very large heels for that matter. But she was also incredibly hands-on and didn't hide behind staff. And give you a couple of quick anecdotes. She called me one morning, the day before Thanksgiving, when she was being challenged for Speaker, I think it was 2016, because I knew a member who was sort of wavering about supporting her. And again, called me personally and said, would you mind calling so-and-so and make your case for why I should be reelected Speaker, which obviously I was happy to do. She was also much more of a policy person than people give her credit for. I wouldn't say she was a wonk, obviously, but she was deep into it. And I also remember getting a call from her, again, herself, no staff, just on my cell phone one night, because she was working on some policy issue that she thought had relevance to what I had done on the auto rescue, and wanted to know how we had handled a certain issue because it might be applicable to whatever it is she was working on at that moment. So it was really quite remarkable. But she's also going to have, I think, an incredibly capable successor, Hakeem Jeffries, who we should also talk about now or at some point, because he's going to be a very, very important figure in the Democratic caucus.
Yes, we'll be talking definitely about who's going to be taking the reins in just a moment. I'm just curious, Robert Gibbs, because you were there as the Affordable Care Act, they were trying to push it over the finish line, and there was a lot of struggle. And when I interviewed Nancy Pelosi for the Forbes Know Your Value 50 over 50 list, and I was talking to her about her career, I said, aside from your 5 kids, because I have to put that aside, what's your greatest accomplishment in life? And without hesitation, she says it was health care. It was the Affordable Care Act. If you could talk a little bit about what you saw during that time.
Yeah, and I think President Obama would say this as well. Without Nancy Pelosi, there isn't an Affordable Care Act. It would have died. And there were many, many opportunities where we didn't think that we could get this over the finish line. And the one person that would never take that for an answer was Speaker Nancy Pelosi. She willed that caucus to again and again and again tackle affordable health care, to push this bill over the line. Again, lots of different avenues in which this could have died. But were it not for her strength and for her passion in this, it may well have happened. And I think there's no doubt that her imprint on that bill and her imprint on that process shows you exactly the type of speaker she was. She listened, she gathered information, but then she moved to get something done. She was results oriented. And again, without her, that bill doesn't pass. We'd still be talking about trying to get health care reform done.
Yeah, and she still talks about that today as her most proud achievement, but there was many more after, including just handling crisis. And there was so much crisis that she was at the center of in the years after that. And so